So I just got off the phone with a lovely lady down there in Alabama, and reminiscing over some old times in a court. And I recall being told that I didn't know the law. And without hesitation, in the middle of the courtroom, I exclaimed, I very well know the law. Thou shalt honor thy Lord above all else. Thou shalt honor thy mother and father. Thou shalt have no engraven images. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy fellow brother. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor. And as I was issuing the law before the alleged judge, the ministerial administrator, thou shalt not murder, I said, and I quote, I believe I know the law. Do you realize that my statement was so profound that nobody could rebut it? That's the power of the Spirit of the divine. You see, the law has already been written on all of your hearts. It's there. You know the difference between right and wrong. Tell you a story about a guy I once knew, childhood friend. Still a good man, grew up a little rough around the edges. See, his parents never taught him that stealing was wrong. And there were people within the community that said, Derrick, if you keep hanging around him before too long, some of your earthly possessions will come up missing. I dismissed them all. I told him that I didn't believe that it was in his nature to steal from me. Well, his whole family's nothing but thieves, Derrick. How do you have so much faith in this man that he's not going to steal from you? I said, because I believe in my heart that he knows the difference between right and wrong, and he values me as a man. He's not going to steal something from me. I have no doubt in my mind that he may need something one day, but I believe that he would ask before he took. It wasn't too much longer after that. I had some money in a car, and he had left his cigarettes in there, and I said, well, just go out to the car. It's unlocked. A couple $100 laying down there on the center console. Thought nothing of it. He went out there, got his cigarettes. We hung out. He ended up walking down the road, leaving later on. And I went back out to my car, never thinking nothing of it. I get to my car, and I'd completely forgotten about the couple $100 just laying there. Never did I question whether or not he was going to steal it in the first place. But it made my heart feel really good that my judgment of character was spot on. You see, because this young man had never been taught that stealing was wrong, but innately he knew that taking something that didn't belong to him was wrong, even though he had never been taught that. Even though his family continued to steal from other people, he did not. So as I opened the door, it was no surprise to me that that couple $100 was still there. You want to know what surprised me? The fact that I forgot that those couple $100 bills were even laying there. So when we talk about law, it's written on your heart, ladies and gentlemen. You're not going to find it in the statutes and codes and provisions and city ordinances. Law is written right there in the Ten Commandments. But you don't even have to read those 10 commandments to know the law. So then we go into equity. You got to have equity eyes. You've got to be able to see through the lies with equity eyes. Equity sees that what ought to be done shall be done, right? That's why they hated Jesus so much. He used their statutes and codes against him, combined with the divine Father's written or unwritten, unspoken laws. And he could defeat them in any way, shape, or form. and it disgusted them. They despised him for his knowledge, his ability to show people the truth. So they crucified him. They persecuted him. And when they couldn't get what they wanted, going from one judge to the next judge to the next judge, finally, the bishops, the preachers took it upon themselves. The Roman Empire took it upon themselves to eliminate him. Because the true justices that he went before through his persecution knew that Jesus had done no inequities. He had done no wrong. But yet it went against everything the Roman Empire was trying to accomplish. And when they couldn't defeat him, what's the first thing that happens when they can't defeat you? They ridicule you. They persecute you. They bring false witness against you, right? Without any supporting facts or evidence, they crucified an innocent man who shed his blood as surety for you. He was the subrogee. He was the subrogor on behalf of the subrogee. All right? So when we look at equity, equity sees that as done what ought to be done. Equity will not suffer or volunteer a wrong to be without a remedy. Ladies and gentlemen, the second one I just read to you shows you that there are no statutes of limitations on anything. If a wrong has been done, a wrong has been done, and it must be made right. But if you volunteer to suffer, then equity will not come to your aid. I recently heard of a case, a foreclosure case. The woman walked into the courtroom and she said, "Judge, I just don't have the means or the ends to be able to pay this debt." And the judge grabbed her mortgage and ripped it right in two in front of God and everybody sitting there. Tore it up in front of the prosecutor, tore it up in front of the bankers, and threw it in the trash. Gave her her house. Why? Because she came into equity. She spoke with earnesty and truth. The truth is there is no money, ladies and gentlemen. There's no way to pay for anything. And Jesus has already paid with the blood that he shed for you. All debts are prepaid. Everything has been taken care of. Everything is a trust. Whether it's a constructive trust, an express trust, a resulting trust, everything is a trust, and I'll show it to you right now. In the beginning, there was the Word, and God saw that the Word was good. And God created the heaven and the earth in 7 days. And at the end of the 7 days, he sat back and saw that everything was good. And then he created man. Let us create man in our image. And then here's the most beautiful thing the divine creator ever did. Aside from create this beautiful place for us to cohabitate and exist, he gave us dominion. That's the first trust ever created. It belongs to us. And he gave his only begotten Son to ensure that all of our pains and our sufferings and our debts, see, debts, sins equate to debt. They're taken care of. All you got to do is make that connection. All you have to do is accept that trust. If I give you the keys to a truck and tell you it's yours, but you don't acquire the keys from the truck from me, acknowledging and accepting the gift, it's an imperfect gift that will never go down the road. Why? Because I still have the keys. You didn't accept it. All you got to do is accept that everlasting covenant that's been blessed upon you by the divine. There's no man or woman on earth that can dispute that that trust exists. Where do you think the Pope in 1302 even got the concept of creating the unum sanctum if it wasn't for the divine? See, the Romans saw what the divine had done, and they quickly moved to be gods by their own right. So they mimicked exactly what the divine had created in the first instance. And people, through trickery and deception, through deviling, took on that false trust, took on that false entity as something of relevance, and ignored the heavenly divine Father's gift that he bestowed upon us in trust, which was dominion, which was his Son. So we get into the next one. Equity delights in equity. Let's talk about equity for a second. Equity is black and white. It's right or it's wrong. You don't need 1,000 men to tell you whether or not you've done wrong, because you already know in your heart when you've done something wrong. Do you believe that not paying a bank for an alleged banknote is wrong? What if I told you that by issuing the promissory note, you created United States dollars, United States of America notes, and they actually stole from you because of your lack of knowledge? Have they completed an inequity? Did they fail to disclose to you that your promissory note took care of the debt? Did you write them a receipt for the value you had generated and created and bestowed upon them for a signature? Did you take that receipt to the IRS to inform the IRS that you had acquired a property with value? So you exchanged value for value. Equity delights in equity, ladies and gentlemen. You have to comprehend what you're doing in order to get equity, because you have to enter into equity with clean hands. One who seeks equity must do equity, right? So if I expect my garden to bear fruit, I must go out there and put in some effort, right? That's equity. I'm putting equity into the ground, and the ground in return is giving me equity, something of substance and nutrition, right? I'm going to take care of the earth. I'm going to take care of that ground. I'm going to make sure that there's nutrients and compost in the garden, and that garden is going to turn out and give me the sweet nectar of equity. I'm going to see a return on my equitable actions, right? Come in with pure intentions, clean heart, plant the seeds, and in turn, those plants are going to yield back to me the sweet nectar of equity. Equity aids, assists the vigilant, not those who slumber on their rights. So in a court setting, when they tell you now is not the time to talk about that issue, if you accept that vulgar display of them lording over you, equity will not come to your aid. I don't care if they threaten you with 30 years in prison if you say another word. If you abide by their blatant threats and you don't stand up, because why? Equity aids, assists the vigilant, not those who slumber on their rights. Let's put it to you this way. If I tell you you can't do a thing and you accept it, did you slumber on your rights? You bet you did. What if what I'm telling you to do is wrong, or so that I can lord over you, and you choose to remain silent? Is equity going to aid you? No. Why? Because equity only aids the vigilant, the one who stands steadfast on the difference between right and wrong. Excuse me, miss, am I entitled to a fair hearing, a fair trial? Or are you going to persecute me like you did Jesus Christ? You think about that for a second. Because when they're telling you to shut up, now's not the time for you to be heard. They're doing exactly what they did to Jesus Christ under the Roman law. So equity does not aid or assist. Equity aids and assists the vigilant, not those who would remain quiet under threat, duress, and coercion. I will never remain quiet, ever. Don't give a damn. I will never shut up. All right? Because equity aids and assists the vigilant, not those who slumber on their rights. I hope I drove that one home to you. It's a major maximum in equity. And I'm not talking about Roman equity. I'm talking the exclusive jurisdiction of equity. Equity imputes an intent to fulfill an obligation. This happens in camera, in chambers, all right? Not out there in the public forum of the court, but rather in private. You have to bestow upon the court the trust, express the trust, and let them know that this needs to be in camera. In chambers can also be public, so you have to be very wary of what you're doing. Just because you're in chambers doesn't mean that you're in camera. So you have to express that there is evidence that resides on the private side that cannot be brought into this venue, and thus I need to compel an Article 3 court in camera with a chancellor. That's your 900-pound gorilla in the room. Equity acts in personam. Personam is mano a mano, man to man, which is why under the Sixth Amendment, you have the right to face your accuser. Now, the Sixth Amendment doesn't grant or coffer you any damn rights. It's a safeguard for which the alleged government is supposed to stay within. It's the structure, the cage, the prison that we have placed them into by their voluntary service to we the people, to their fellow man. So equity acts in personam, mano a mano. An agent and agency can never bring a claim against you. A bank cannot bring a claim against you. They're not in personam. You cannot hurt a corporation. Equity arbors a forfeiture. Number 9, equity does not require an idle gesture. Number 10, he who comes into equity must, absolute, come with clean hands. What does that mean? Let's go over it a little bit. Clean hands. 1, a good clean conscience. Right? 2, no ill will or bad intent. So we're going to come in with what? Good faith, a clean conscience, clean hands to see what? That what ought to be done should be done. We don't need statutes. We don't need codes. We don't need all that hoopla to express the truth. Well, Nebraska Revised Statute 1685 says that, you can do this if you are licensed to do this. If you're licensed by the licensor, you can do this. Although it's unlawful, it's now legal because you're licensed by the licensor. That's an equity, ladies and gentlemen. I'll stomp a mud hole in anybody's ass who tries to bring me that shit. Oh, you got a license by the devil to do deviling, and it all of a sudden becomes lawful? I don't think so. Get out of here. You want to do the devil's work? Then you go play in the devil's field. You're going to come into equity. You're going to come with the divine power of the Creator. Because we know the difference between right and wrong, and I will not be tempted by the devil. Will not happen. You look up a lawyer and the definition for a lawyer, and it will tell you that they practice deviling, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know how much freaking clearer I can be. Equity delights to do justice and not by halves. I don't know if that needs any explanation. Basically, what it's telling you is it's either right or it's wrong. It's not somewhere in between the muddied waters by lawyers that it's going to be decided. It's either right or it's wrong. There is no in between. There is no gray area. Equity delights to do justice and not by halves. It's in whole. Equity will take jurisdiction to avoid a multiplicity of suits. There is no need for other suits to be brought if we're in equity, because it's going to take jurisdiction and make sure that is what ought to be done shall be done. Equity follows the law. What is the law? Contract creates the law and equity follows the law, right? So if you enter into a contract, you're bound by that contract. Why? Because your word is your bond. Unless there were deceptive practices used to implement the contract, whereas by most banks, I can show you about 99.9% of mortgage loans are absolutely deceitful fraud. I don't like using the word fraud. I would rather use gross negligence, willful intent to deceive, things of that nature, versus using the word fraud. Where equities, let's go back here. Equity follows the law. Number 14, equity will not aid a volunteer. If you volunteered for something, you're stuck. You're stuck in it. If you volunteered to do something that caused you harm, injury, damage, and loss, then equity will not come save you. So you need to learn how to do your qualified endorsements, accord and satisfaction. You need to learn how to make your mark, signet, and seals on paper, all while reserving your unalienable rights granted to you by the Most High. Where equities are equal, the law will prevail. So where the equities are equal, the contract prevails. Okay? Between equal equities, the first in order of time shall prevail. So if the equities were equal, but the other person didn't know their equitable interest and investment, equity will not aid a volunteer in number 14. So we get down here to between equal equities, the first in order of time shall prevail. 17. Equity will not complete an imperfect gift. Grantee absolute for lawful consideration. 18. Equity will not allow statutes to be used as a cloak for fraud. Again, I err on the side of caution about using this maxim in equity because of the word fraud. Deceived might be a better word. Equity will not allow a trust to fail for want of a trustee. Ladies and gentlemen, that's so important. I just explained to you at the beginning of this video that everything is a trust. Everything, and I can prove it. From the beginning of time to the current, the first trust ever created was by the divine creator. Everything is a trust from here on out. From the beginning, from the word, everything is a trust. Whether implied, constructive, through action, it's all a trust. Whether an express trust, a constructive trust, a will, deed, and testament is a trust. Equity will not allow a trust to fail for a want of a trustee. The trustee doesn't have to exist for a trust to be present. Nor does the beneficiary have to know that they're the beneficiary. How does that help you with paying your bills that are in a trust? Can you appoint a trustee? Is the utility company now the trustee once they've been noticed? Did they have to be noticed in the first place that they were the trustee to be a trustee? Absolutely not. How about that car dealership selling you those cars? When you issue your line of credit through your promissory note and create an American note A United States note, not an FRN note with a promissory note. We as Americans create United States notes, not FRNs. So do they have to be notified that they're the trustee? Nope. Can you do it after the fact? Absolutely. Can you do it 20 years down the road? You bet. You bet. Number 20, equity regards the beneficiary as the true owner. Are you the beneficiary of the everlasting covenant? Are you the beneficiary of the blood shed by Christ as surety for your debts? Are you the true owner of that everlasting covenant promised to you? If you keep thine statutes and keep thy word and stay loyal and walk with me down that narrow path, are you the owner? That's something that you have to come to terms with. I can't tell you whether you are or you're not. I know who I am. I know what path I walk. The question is, do you? Here's a quasi-maximum, 21. He who occasioned the loss must bear the burden. He who provides the ends also provides the means. Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution is brilliant. The more I learn, the more I grow fond of that document. Again, it doesn't give you any rights. It only gives boundaries for which the government is bound. If you know that. If you don't know that, they're going to run amok on you. Article 1, Section 10, not only does it protect your unalienable right to contract at will, it's better than that. It's bigger than that. And it took me some time to learn. You see, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, gives you the unalienable right to create a trust, an express trust, a foreign grantor trust, a living will and trust. What's the one thing the judiciary cannot compete against? Equity, ladies and gentlemen. The trust. They cannot defeat the trust. So it's time that we shift gears. It's time that we open up our minds to the power that's vested within each and every one of us, for the good Lord placed it within our heart, our soul, to be able to do these things and help our fellow man ascend of the mind. You see, he was the grantor and Jesus was the grantee. Holds legal and equitable title absolute. You see, after Jesus gave himself to the spear, shedding his blood as surety for our debt, he became grantee absolute. And the divine gave him the heaven and the earth for his sacrifice. Grantor settler. Trustee holds legal title. The beneficiary holds equitable title. And when you merge the titles together and place them in a trust, the trust owns absolutely the equitable and legal title. And you are the beneficiary of that trust, whether it be a trust, express trust. All commerce is based on two maxims in equity. Equity will not aid a volunteer, and equity will not perfect, complete an imperfect gift. Ladies and gentlemen, when you're going into court, every court setting is just the same. It's all a constructive trust. And if you have equity eyes and the ability to see the trust, and you can express the trust, and you can get that ministerial administrator to acknowledge, I see the trust, you've prevailed. Now it's just a matter of giving performance. But equity will see that what ought to be done shall be done. I hope this helps you guys out. Special private priority, Gonzalez, Derrick Chaton. Gonzalez being the British name that they're using. You see, back in biblical times, nobody had a last name. That's a Roman thing. That's a British thing. That's a man-created creation thing. It belongs to them. My given name, my Christian appellation, blessed upon me by the divine, Derrick Chaton. Given to my parents by the divine. They didn't come up with that. He did. He told them what I was going to be called. And when I looked up the etymology of the word derrick, boy, was I in delight. This exact spelling, D-E-R-R-I-C-K. The etymology and the root of the word is lynchman, the hangman, for the inequities that people should do. Isn't it ironic that my name would be Derrick? My calling would be Derrick, the lynchman responsible for hanging the people that do inequities. And wouldn't it be just so wonderful if someday the government would take interest in a man like that, and he would find himself and take a stand against the inequities? Rather a miracle, rather a blessing that we're even all here. It's like 1 in 400 million are the odds of you even being conceived. Let alone 1 in 7 billion of your parents even meeting each other. You want to talk about miracles. You want to talk about miraculous events. You being on this earth is a blessing, and you have a calling. You have a purpose. I don't know what it is. Perhaps you don't know what your calling is yet either. But I'm telling you, open your heart, open your eyes, start to have equity eyes. Start to listen to that law that was written on your heart and do the equitable thing. Open that good book. You're not going to learn this stuff in church, ladies and gentlemen. They're barred from teaching you. They're 501c3s. They operate under the control of the establishment. They are never to go against the word of their God, which is government. You want to learn that book, you have to read it page by page. You don't read it chapter here, chapter there, a piece of the scripture here, a piece of the scripture there. That is not how that book was intended to be read. If you want to see through the parables, if you want to see what that book has to offer you, it's the original book of trust. It's a banking manual and it has all the laws in it. If you want to know the truth, you have to read it page by page. Start at Genesis and work your way through it. 16 days in prison is what caused me to open my eyes to the power of that book. Because I had read everything else. I had read through Gibson's. I had read Pomeroy. I had read Joseph's story. I had read a lot of different things. I had read statutes and codes chasing my tails for years on end, never to find resolve. And I opened that book and instantly my heart just fell over with peace. Blessed be the peacemakers. I'm not here to lynch anybody. I'm not here to raise a bunch of hell. I'm here to help you open your eyes to the reality that exists. Come up out of her. Come up out of that fictional realm. Leave those engraven images behind. Do the right thing. Come with clean hands. The land of milk and honey does exist here. Ladies and gentlemen, I speak to people who live in heaven all day long. Their bills are taken care of. Why? Because they know the truth, and it is not that hard. The truth shall set you free. Come up out of them Black's Law dictionaries. Those are the books for deviling. Those are the books for the demons. You leave them books alone. Get back into that scripture. Come in with clean hands. Thanks for joining me, and I hope this helps each and every one of you out.